What if everything we know about Hermaeus Mora is wrong? What if the Daedric Prince of Knowledge has been feeding us false information all this time? Today, we're going to look into the lore and see whether the tentacled Lord of Forbidden Knowledge has been playing a much longer game than we realized. For years, players have accepted Mora's word as gospel. He's the keeper of secrets, the hoarder of forbidden knowledge, the one who knows all. But what if that's exactly what he wants us to think? What if his greatest lie is that he never lies at all? We'll explore his connections to other Daedric princes, his manipulations of mortals throughout history, and the suspicious gaps in his supposed omniscience. By the end of this deep dive, you might never trust the woodland man again. Let's start with an ancient text that few pay attention to, the Conjurer's Doom. This book tells the story of a mage who sought knowledge from Hermaeus Mora and paid the ultimate price. On the surface, it seems like another cautionary tale about the dangers of dealing with Daedra. But look closer. The conjurer in question loses his sanity and his soul. He loses his very identity. Mora takes his knowledge and erases the man from history. His name disappears from records. His achievements vanish. Even his family forgets he existed. This raises a disturbing question. How many other seekers of knowledge has Mora simply erased? How many bargains has he made where the price was what was agreed upon and complete obliteration? And if he can erase people from history itself, what else has he hidden from us? The Conjurer's Doom might be proof that Mora has been rewriting history all along. He removes inconvenient truths and people who knew too much about his real nature. This is a warning about seeking forbidden knowledge and evidence of something much worse. Think about it. A being who claims to know all knowledge selectively erases certain information from existence. He gathers knowledge and removes parts of it. That behavior belongs to someone with an agenda. So who exactly is Hermaeus Mora? Ask most people, and they'll tell you he's the Daedric Prince of Knowledge, Fate, and Memory. He's often described as the most knowledgeable being in existence, someone who has witnessed every secret and recorded every piece of forbidden lore. But here's where things get interesting. Mora himself has given different accounts of his origins and nature throughout the games. In some texts, he claims to be as old as knowledge itself. In others, he suggests he came into being when the first secret was whispered. These are contradictory statements about his fundamental nature. A being who truly knows everything wouldn't need to give conflicting stories about himself. Unless, of course, he's deliberately spreading misinformation to hide his true origins and purpose. Mora presents himself as neutral, a simple collector and keeper of knowledge. But his actions tell a different story. He actively interferes in mortal affairs, manipulates events to his advantage, and seems to have very specific goals that go far beyond mere collection of secrets. The way he speaks also reveals something important. Unlike other Daedric princes who are often direct in their communication, Mora speaks in riddles and half-truths. He gives answers that seem complete, but leave out crucial details. He offers knowledge while simultaneously withholding it. This behavior belongs to someone who uses knowledge as a weapon. He doles it out strategically to achieve specific outcomes. The question of what Hermaeus Mora actually is becomes even more complex when we examine the contradictions in the lore. He's described as both incredibly ancient and surprisingly active in recent events. He's said to know all secrets, yet he constantly seeks more knowledge from mortals. One theory suggests that Mora is something else entirely. Some texts hint that he might be a fragment of the original dreamer, or a consciousness that emerged from the collective unconscious of all thinking beings. But here's what's really suspicious. Mora's realm of Apocrypha is described as containing all knowledge that exists or ever existed. Yet when mortals visit, they find libraries that seem incomplete, books that are blank, and knowledge that's been censored or altered. If Mora truly possessed all knowledge, why would there be gaps? Why would some information be missing or corrupted? The answer might be that Mora has access to knowledge that serves his purposes. This suggests that everything we've been told about his nature might be a carefully constructed lie. He edits knowledge, deciding what information exists and what vanishes. The implications are staggering. If Mora has been selectively editing the knowledge available to mortals, then everything we think we know about history, magic, and even the nature of reality itself might be compromised. The Nordic traditions provide some of our earliest references to Hermaeus Mora, but they paint a very different picture than what we see in later imperial texts. The Nords knew him as the Woodland Man, a trickster figure who would appear to hunters and travelers in the forests of Skyrim. In these older stories, the Woodland Man was a local spirit who traded information for favors, often leaving his bargaining partners worse off than before. The knowledge he offered was usually practical, but came with hidden costs or unforeseen consequences. What's interesting is how this portrayal evolved over time. As Nordic society became more connected to the wider empire, their stories about the Woodland Man changed. He became more powerful, more knowledgeable, more cosmic in scope. This evolution suggests that Mora has been actively reshaping how mortals perceive him. The humble trickster of Nordic folklore became the grand Daedric prince of later imperial scholarship. But which version is true? The Nordic stories might preserve an older, more accurate understanding of Mora's nature. They describe a being who is clever and manipulative, but aware of everything. Someone who gathers information through trickery and bargaining rather than cosmic awareness. This would explain many of the contradictions in Mora's character. He gathers intelligence and makes people think he knows more than he does. The transformation from woodland trickster to cosmic principle might be his greatest deception yet. The Nords also have stories about the Woodland Man's rivalry with other forest spirits and nature deities. These tales suggest that Mora's power was once much more limited and localized. His current cosmic status might be a relatively recent development, achieved through centuries of careful manipulation and misdirection. The relationship between Hermaeus Mora and Mephala provides crucial insight into Mora's true nature. Both princes deal in secrets and hidden knowledge, but their approaches are different. Mephala weaves webs of lies and truth together, creating complex plots that serve her purposes. Mora presents himself as a neutral keeper of knowledge, but look at how they interact with mortals. Mephala's followers, the Morag Tong, are open about their allegiance and their methods. They're assassins who serve the spider goddess, and they openly admit this fact. Mora's followers often remain unaware that they're serving him. This difference is telling. If Mora was truly neutral, why would he need to hide his influence? Why would his followers be unaware of their true allegiance, while Mephala's servants proudly proclaim theirs? The answer might be that Mora's goals are so controversial or dangerous that even his own followers couldn't stomach them if they knew the truth. He needs to operate in secret because his agenda would be opposed by mortals and other Daedra alike. There are also hints that Mora and Mephala have worked together in the past, sharing information and coordinating their manipulations. But their partnership seems unequal. Mephala is open about her schemes, while Mora remains hidden behind layers of deception. This suggests that Mora might be the senior partner in their relationship, using Mephala's more obvious manipulations to distract attention from his own deeper schemes. While everyone watches the spider's web, they miss the tentacles moving in the shadows. The Moragtong's history also reveals something important about how Daedric influence works in Tamriel. Their organization has survived for thousands of years, adapting to changing political situations while maintaining their core mission. This kind of institutional longevity requires careful planning and manipulation, exactly the kind of long-term thinking that Mora is known for. One of our most reliable sources of information about Hermaeus Mora comes from an unexpected place, the observations of Neloth, the Telvanni wizard who has spent considerable time studying Daedric magic. Neloth's comments about Apocrypha are particularly revealing because he approaches the realm from a scholarly perspective rather than as a worshipper or devoted follower. Neloth notes that Apocrypha behaves differently from other Daedric realms. Most Daedric planes reflect their prince's personality and desires in a straightforward way. Mehrunes Dagon's realm is chaotic and destructive. Molag Bal's domain is oppressive and cruel. But Apocrypha is different. According to Neloth, the realm seems designed to frustrate and confuse visitors rather than simply reflect Mora's nature. The libraries are organized in ways that make no sense. Books that should contain specific information are often empty or filled with unrelated text. The very architecture seems designed to prevent efficient research rather than facilitate it. This observation is crucial because it suggests that Apocrypha is a trap. The realm is designed to waste the time of scholars and researchers who visit it. Neloth also notes that the knowledge gained from Apocrypha often comes with subtle alterations or omissions that become apparent later. Spells learned there might have hidden flaws. Historical information might be altered to support false narratives. Even mathematical and scientific principles might be tweaked in ways that lead to long-term problems. This suggests that Mora is actively corrupting knowledge. Every piece of information that passes through his realm becomes compromised, turned into a tool for his manipulation rather than genuine enlightenment. Neloth's most disturbing observation is that visitors to Apocrypha often leave with false memories of what they learned there. They remember gaining great knowledge, but when they try to apply it, they find gaps and inconsistencies that were absent during their visit. The experience of reading a black book provides direct insight into Mora's methods of manipulation. These artifacts are presented as repositories of forbidden knowledge, but the actual experience of reading them reveals something much more sinister. When a mortal opens a black book, they enter into a mental communion with Hermaeus Mora himself. The knowledge is fed directly into the reader's mind by the Daedric Prince. This creates an opportunity for Mora to do much more than simply share information. During the reading process, he can examine the reader's memories, implant false recollections, and alter their understanding of fundamental concepts. The reader thinks they're gaining knowledge, but they're being reprogrammed. The physical effects of reading a black book also tell us something important. Readers often experience disorientation, memory loss, and psychological changes that persist long after they've finished reading. These are symptoms of mental tampering. Many readers report that the knowledge gained from black books feels different from normal learning. It sits apart from their existing understanding, like a foreign object in their mind. This suggests that the information has been altered to serve Mora's purposes rather than the reader's needs. Perhaps most disturbing is what happens to readers who try to share the knowledge they've gained. They often find themselves unable to accurately communicate what they've learned, or they discover that their memories of the book's contents have changed. This prevents the spread of information that might reveal Mora's true agenda. The black books are instruments of control. Each reader becomes more aligned with Mora's goals, less capable of independent thought, and more useful as an unwitting agent of his will. Apocrypha itself deserves closer examination because its structure reveals so much about Mora's true nature. The realm is described as an infinite library containing all knowledge, but visitors consistently report that it feels more like a maze than a repository of learning. The organization of Apocrypha makes no logical sense. Books on related topics are scattered across vast distances. Crucial information is often hidden in obscure texts that have no apparent connection to the subject matter. The indexing system seems designed to make research as difficult as possible. This structure would make sense if you wanted to control access to information, doling it out selectively to serve your own purposes. The inhabitants of Apocrypha are also telling. The seekers and lurkers that patrol the realm are guards. Their job is to monitor and control visitor activities. They attack anyone who tries to access certain areas or who spends too much time researching particular topics. Even more suspicious are the human scribes found throughout Apocrypha. These are mortals who came seeking knowledge and never left. They spend eternity copying and recopying texts, but they seem to have no understanding of what they're transcribing. They've been reduced to mindless automatons, their original personalities and goals completely erased. This fate awaits anyone who spends too much time in Apocrypha, suggesting that the realm is hostile to genuine scholarship. The longer someone stays, the more their independence and critical thinking abilities are eroded. The books themselves are another source of concern. Many visitors report finding texts that seem to change their contents based on who's reading them. A book about historical events might present completely different facts to different readers. A magical treatise might provide working spells to one person and dangerous nonsense to another. This selective presentation of information is perhaps Mora's most powerful tool for manipulation. By controlling what each person learns, he can shape their understanding of reality to serve his purposes. Two scholars reading the same book might come away with completely different and contradictory knowledge, both convinced that they've learned the truth. The ciphers of the eye represent one of Mora's most ambitious attempts at manipulation, and their story reveals the true scope of his deceptions. These artifacts were supposedly created to preserve ancient knowledge, but their actual function seems to be quite different. The ciphers actively seek out specific individuals and compel them to use the knowledge within. This is active recruitment of agents. The ciphers are tools for identifying and converting mortals who might be useful to Mora's goals. What's particularly suspicious is how the ciphers spread. They actively circulate, appearing in the hands of people who have specific skills or access that Mora needs. A cipher containing military knowledge might find its way to a general. One with magical lore might appear in a mage's study. This targeted distribution suggests that Mora has an extensive intelligence network that he uses to identify potential assets. He carefully places specific information with specific people to achieve specific outcomes. The knowledge contained in the ciphers also tends to be incomplete or flawed in subtle ways. A military treatise might contain brilliant tactics, but omit crucial details about logistics. A magical text might provide powerful spells, but leave out important safety precautions. This creates dependency. Users of the ciphers often find that they need additional information to make full use of what they've learned. This creates a cycle of dependence, drawing them deeper into Mora's web as they seek the missing pieces of their knowledge. Each additional revelation makes them more invested in serving his purposes. The ultimate fate of most cipher users is telling. They tend to disappear from historical records after making significant contributions to their fields. Their innovations and discoveries remain, but the people themselves are forgotten. This pattern suggests that Mora is harvesting both their knowledge and their very identities. The relationship between Hermaeus Mora and Nocturnal provides crucial insight into how the Daedric princes actually interact with each other. On the surface, their spheres seem complementary. She rules over shadows and the unknown, while he governs knowledge and secrets. But their actual relationship is much more complex and competitive. Nocturnal's domain includes the Evergloam, a realm of perpetual twilight where lost things end up. This includes lost knowledge, forgotten secrets, and abandoned lore. In theory, this should put her in direct competition with Mora, who claims dominion over all knowledge. But there's very little evidence of direct conflict between them. Instead, they seem to have developed a working relationship where Nocturnal handles the lost knowledge while Mora focuses on the forbidden variety. This division of labor is suspiciously convenient and suggests some kind of formal agreement between them. The Thieves Guild's relationship with Nocturnal also reveals something important about how mortal worship affects Daedric power. The Guild's members steal information, secrets, and knowledge. When they dedicate these thefts to Nocturnal, where does that stolen knowledge actually go? There are hints that much of what the Thieves Guild steals eventually finds its way to Hermaeus Mora through some kind of exchange system between the two princes. Nocturnal gets the glory and worship from successful thieves, while Mora gets access to the secrets they've uncovered. This arrangement would explain why Nocturnal seems threatened by Mora's claims to dominion over all knowledge. She's his business partner. Together, they've created a system for harvesting information from mortals that benefits both of them. The implications of this partnership are disturbing. It suggests that the Daedric princes have formed organized alliances to more efficiently exploit mortals. Nocturnal's followers often report dreams and visions that contain useful information they shouldn't have access to. The traditional explanation is that Nocturnal reveals hidden knowledge to reward faithful service. But what if the information is actually coming from Mora's vast collection, shared through their partnership? The concept of pocket realms reveals another layer of Mora's deception. These are small oblivion planes that exist within or adjacent to larger realms, often without the knowledge of their host prince. The existence of pocket realms suggests that the boundaries between Daedric domains are more flexible than most people believe. Several texts reference mysterious libraries that appear in unexpected locations, sometimes in other Daedric realms, sometimes in remote corners of Mundus itself. These libraries share characteristics with Apocrypha, but seem to be separate from Mora's main realm. They might be pocket realms that Mora has established to extend his influence without detection. The strategic value of pocket realms is enormous. They allow a Daedric prince to operate in territory that should belong to another power, gathering intelligence and exerting influence without triggering the kind of direct confrontation that would result from an open invasion. Mora's use of pocket realms might explain some of the contradictions in accounts of his power and influence. Scholars studying in what they think is a neutral magical library might actually be in one of his hidden domains, unknowingly providing him with information about their research and motivations. The existence of these hidden realms also raises questions about the true extent of Mora's domain. If he can create pocket realms that are undetectable to other Daedric princes, how many might he have established? How much of what mortals think is independent scholarship is actually taking place under his direct observation? There are also reports of libraries that appear to be normal, mortal institutions, but contain books that couldn't possibly exist in the normal world. These might be pocket realms disguised as mundane locations, allowing Mora to influence mortal scholarship without revealing his involvement. The people who work in these institutions often report strange dreams and compulsions. They find themselves copying texts they remember seeing, organizing books according to systems they understand, and helping visitors find information that they're certain was in the collection before. This infiltration of mortal institutions of learning represents perhaps Mora's most insidious form of manipulation. By corrupting the very foundations of scholarship and education, he can shape how entire civilizations understand reality without anyone realizing they're being influenced. Hermaeus Mora's claimed dominion over fate and destiny is perhaps his most audacious lie. The concept suggests that he knows what will happen and has some control over future events. But examination of specific prophecies and predictions associated with Mora reveals a very different picture. Most prophecies connected to Mora are self-fulfilling. They create conditions that make certain outcomes more likely. A prophecy about a war might include specific details that, when acted upon by those who hear it, actually cause the conflict it supposedly predicted. This technique allows Mora to appear prophetic without actually having genuine foresight. He creates the future through careful manipulation of information and circumstances. The mortals who believe they're following destiny are actually being guided toward outcomes that serve his purposes. The dragon prophecies are a perfect example of this technique. These ancient texts supposedly foretold the return of dragons and the coming of the last dragonborn. But close examination reveals that the prophecies are vague enough to apply to many different scenarios, while being specific enough to guide actions in particular directions. The prophecies also conveniently ignore certain possibilities, while emphasizing others. They focus on conflict and dramatic change, while downplaying more peaceful or stable alternatives. This selective emphasis suggests that the prophecies are deliberate attempts to steer history toward chaos and upheaval. Mora benefits from chaos because it creates opportunities for ambitious mortals to seek forbidden knowledge and make desperate bargains. A world at peace has less need for the kind of power that comes with a price. A world in turmoil is full of people willing to trade their souls for an advantage. The concept of destiny itself is also suspect when examined closely. If the future is truly fixed, then mortal actions become meaningless. But if the future can be changed, then destiny is another word for probability. Mora's claimed mastery over fate might be an advanced understanding of cause and effect, combined with the ability to influence key variables. The followers of other Daedric princes seem to believe that fate is fixed. They make plans, take precautions, and adapt to changing circumstances. Only Mora's associates seem convinced that events are predetermined, a belief that conveniently makes them more willing to accept whatever role he assigns them in his schemes. The very concept of forbidden knowledge is central to understanding Mora's deception. By categorizing certain information as forbidden, he creates artificial scarcity and increases demand. People want what they have, and knowledge that's supposedly dangerous becomes more attractive than freely available information. But examination of specific examples of forbidden knowledge reveals that most of it is dangerous to Mora's interests. The forbidden texts contain information that would expose his manipulations or reveal the flaws in his carefully constructed narratives. Consider the reaction when mortals do gain access to supposedly forbidden knowledge. Instead of being corrupted or destroyed, they often become more independent and harder to manipulate. The knowledge is forbidden because it's liberating. Mora's hoarding of forbidden knowledge also serves another purpose. It allows him to selectively release information when it serves his goals. By controlling access to certain types of knowledge, he can ensure that technological and magical advancement happens at a pace and in directions that benefit his long-term plans. The historical pattern is clear. Civilizations that develop too quickly or in ways that threaten Mora's influence tend to experience catastrophic setbacks. Wars break out, plagues spread, or natural disasters occur. These events are often attributed to the abuse of forbidden knowledge, but they might actually be direct interventions by Mora to maintain his control. The Dwemer disappearance is a perfect example of this pattern. They were advancing rapidly in both technology and understanding of the divine. Their research was approaching conclusions that would have undermined the entire system of divine and Daedric worship. Then, they vanished without explanation, leaving behind only hints of what they had discovered. The official explanation is that they tampered with forces beyond their understanding and paid the price. But what if the truth is simpler? What if they discovered something about the nature of the Daedra that Mora allowed to spread? Their disappearance might have been an execution. The relationship between Hermaeus Mora and Akatosh represents one of the most complex and important dynamics in the Elder Scrolls cosmos. Akatosh, as the dragon god of time, should theoretically have authority over all temporal matters, including knowledge of past and future events. Yet Mora also claims dominion over fate and prophecy. This apparent overlap in spheres of influence should create direct conflict between the two deities. But instead of competition, we see what appears to be cooperation. The dragon prophecies that guide so much of Tamriel's history seem to blend Akatosh's temporal authority with Mora's knowledge of secrets. The cooperation is suspicious because Akatosh and Mora represent different philosophies. Akatosh is associated with order, stability, and the protection of mortal civilization. Mora thrives on chaos, secrets, and the exploitation of mortal weakness. They should be natural enemies. One explanation is that Mora has somehow gained influence over Akatosh, or corrupted the dragon god's perception of time itself. If Mora can manipulate what Akatosh sees when he looks forward and backward through time, he could effectively control the flow of history while making it appear that events are unfolding according to divine will. The dragon breaks provide evidence for this theory. These temporal anomalies occur when multiple contradictory timelines exist simultaneously before collapsing into a single official history. During these events, reality itself becomes malleable, and the final timeline that emerges might be the one that originally occurred. Mora would have enormous influence during dragon breaks, because his knowledge of all possible timelines would give him the ability to shape which version becomes real. He could edit history itself, removing inconvenient truths and inserting useful lies that would then become retroactively true. The dragonborn phenomenon also suggests Mora's influence over Akatosh. Dragonborn individuals are supposedly blessed by Akatosh with dragon souls, but they consistently end up dealing with Hermaeus Mora in significant ways. This pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. What if the Dragonborn are actually chosen by Mora and then presented to Akatosh as divinely chosen heroes? The dragon god, seeing their apparent divine nature through Mora's manipulation, would naturally support and empower them, unknowingly serving Mora's agenda. Hermaeus Mora's cultivation of mystery around his true nature and goals is perhaps his most effective tool for maintaining power and influence. By presenting himself as unknowable and incomprehensible, he discourages the kind of critical examination that might expose his deceptions. The language used to describe Mora in most texts emphasizes his alien nature and cosmic scope. He's described as being beyond mortal understanding, operating on timescales and with motivations that mortals couldn't possibly comprehend. This presentation serves to shut down inquiry before it begins. But analysis of Mora's actual behavior reveals patterns that are quite comprehensible when viewed in the right context. His actions consistently serve to increase his influence and power while weakening potential rivals. His manipulations follow logical progressions toward specific goals. His timing is strategic rather than random. The mystery surrounding Mora is a carefully maintained facade designed to prevent people from realizing how mundane his actual motivations are. Strip away the tentacles and eldritch imagery, and you find a being whose goals are depressingly familiar. More power, more control, more influence. The texts that describe encounters with Mora also follow suspicious patterns. They emphasize the overwhelming nature of the experience while providing very little concrete information about what actually happened. Witnesses describe feeling awed and enlightened but struggle to articulate what they learned or why it was significant. This suggests that the incomprehensible nature of Mora is actually a side effect of mental manipulation rather than genuine cosmic transcendence. Mortals who encounter him have their memories edited to remove specific details, while leaving behind vague impressions of profundity and importance. The scholarly tradition that's grown up around studying Mora also reinforces his mystique in ways that seem deliberately counterproductive to actual understanding. Researchers focus on cataloging his various titles and epithets rather than analyzing his behavior. They debate the metaphysical implications of his existence rather than examining the practical effects of his interventions. This academic approach serves Mora's interests perfectly. It keeps scholars busy with abstract theorizing, while preventing them from conducting the kind of concrete investigation that might reveal uncomfortable truths about his nature and methods. The connections between Hermaeus Mora, the mysterious realm of Lig, and the Daedric princes Molag Bal and Mehrunes Dagon reveal a web of relationships that suggests coordinated action rather than independent operations. Understanding these connections is crucial to grasping the true scope of Mora's influence. Lig is described in obscure texts as a previous version of Tamriel that existed before the current world. According to these accounts, Lig was destroyed and replaced by the Tamriel we know today. The destruction was supposedly the result of Mehrunes Dagon's actions, but the details are suspiciously vague. What's interesting is that most information about Lig comes from sources connected to Hermaeus Mora. This gives him significant control over how this previous world is understood and remembered. If Lig never actually existed, or if it existed but was very different from how it's described, Mora would be the one deciding what mortals believe about this supposed lost civilization. The relationship between Mora and Mehrunes Dagon is particularly complex. Dagon is known for his association with destruction and change, but his actions often seem to benefit Mora's long-term goals. The Oblivion Crisis, supposedly a random act of destruction, resulted in significant changes to how magic and politics work in Tamriel, changes that gave Mora new opportunities for influence. Molag Bal's role in this network is subtler but equally important. As the Daedric Prince of Domination and Corruption, Bal's actions often create the desperate circumstances that drive mortals to seek forbidden knowledge from Mora. The vampires and other corrupted beings that serve Bal also make excellent agents for gathering intelligence and spreading Mora's influence. The coordination between these three princes suggests that they formed some kind of alliance or mutual support network. Dagon creates chaos and destruction. Baal exploits the resulting desperation and corruption, and Mora harvests the knowledge and secrets that emerge from the turmoil. This alliance would explain why events in Tamriel often seem to benefit multiple Daedric princes simultaneously. Instead of competing with each other, they're working together to maximize their collective influence over mortal affairs. The mythic Dawn cult, which served Mehrunes Dagon during the Oblivion Crisis, also had suspicious connections to scholarly and magical institutions. Their ability to infiltrate centers of learning and gather intelligence about imperial defenses suggests support from someone with extensive knowledge networks, someone like Hermaeus Mora. The story of Miraak and his relationship with Hermaeus Mora provides perhaps the clearest example of how the Daedric prince operates. Miraak was the first Dragonborn, blessed with the same powers that would later be granted to the last Dragonborn thousands of years later. But his story reveals disturbing patterns in how Mora treats his most powerful servants. According to the official account, Miraak served the dragons during their rule over ancient Skyrim. He learned the Thu'um and gained great power, but eventually rebelled against his dragon masters. In desperation, he turned to Hermaeus Mora for help, receiving knowledge that allowed him to challenge the dragons successfully. But this narrative has significant gaps and inconsistencies. If Miraak was already Dragonborn, why did he need additional power from Mora to fight dragons? If he was truly the first Dragonborn, why is there no mention of him in Dragon-era records until his rebellion? The timeline makes sense unless crucial information has been omitted or altered. A more disturbing possibility is that Miraak was born Dragonborn at all. What if Mora somehow created or modified him, giving him dragon power specifically to serve as an agent against the dragons? This would explain why Miraak's Thu'um seems different from other Dragonborn. It might be a natural gift but an artificial modification. Miraak's fate is also telling. Instead of being destroyed when he rebelled against Mora, he was imprisoned in Apocrypha for thousands of years. This was punishment. It was preservation. Mora kept his most powerful agent alive and available for future use, waiting for the right circumstances to deploy him again. The arrival of the last Dragonborn created those circumstances. Mora arranged for the two Dragonborn to come into conflict, knowing that the survivor would be weakened and more dependent on his support. The entire scenario was orchestrated to ensure that Mora would retain control over Dragonborn power regardless of who won. The prophecy that foretold the return of dragons and the coming of the last Dragonborn might have been a plan, written by Mora and disguised as ancient wisdom. By creating the expectation of these events, he ensured that mortals would interpret them as fulfillment of destiny rather than recognizing them as manufactured crises. Miraak's knowledge of the dragon aspect Shout and other powers that the last Dragonborn doesn't naturally possess suggests that Mora has been developing and refining Dragonborn abilities for millennia. Each Dragonborn might be an experiment, a test of different combinations of draconic power and mortal will. The relationship between these legendary figures and Hermaeus Mora reveals his true power. He doesn't simply react to events, he creates them. The heroes that mortals celebrate as saviors might actually be his carefully crafted tools, deployed at precisely the right moments to achieve his goals. This raises disturbing questions about free will and destiny in the Elder Scrolls universe. If Mora has been manufacturing heroes and crises for thousands of years, how much of history is real and how much is scripted? How many of the great events that shaped Tamriel were actually elaborate performances designed to serve his agenda? The evidence suggests that Hermaeus Mora's true power isn't knowledge, it's control. He doesn't just collect information. He shapes reality itself through careful manipulation of key individuals and events. The tentacled prince of forbidden lore might actually be the puppet master, pulling the strings behind every major crisis in Tamriel's history. But there's one aspect of Mora's deception that we haven't fully explored yet, his relationship with a forgotten Daedric prince whose very existence threatens to expose the depth of his lies. When we look at Ithelia, we see cracks in Mora's carefully constructed facade. Italia was the Daedric prince of paths and untrodden ways, a being whose domain overlapped significantly with Mora's claimed authority over fate and destiny. Unlike Mora, who presents destiny as fixed and knowable, Italia represented the infinite possibilities that exist at every moment of choice. Her existence posed a fundamental threat to Mora's entire philosophy. If paths could be changed and destinies rewritten, then his claims to prophetic knowledge became meaningless. Worse, if mortals learned that they had genuine agency over their futures, they would have no need for his forbidden knowledge. The other Daedric princes, led by Hermaeus Mora, conspired to erase Italia from existence. But this wasn't a simple act of destruction. It was a complex, magical working that removed her from history itself. Every record of her deeds was altered. Every memory of her existence was modified. Every trace of her influence was carefully edited out of reality. This conspiracy reveals something crucial about Mora's true nature and capabilities. He doesn't just manipulate individual mortals or events. He can rewrite the fundamental structure of reality itself. The erasure of Italia proves that everything we think we know about the past might be a carefully constructed lie. The process of erasing a Daedric prince from existence would require unprecedented cooperation between multiple powerful entities. It suggests that Mora has influence over other Daedric princes that goes far beyond simple alliance or mutual benefit. He might have some form of leverage or authority that allows him to compel their cooperation. But even this massive conspiracy had flaws. Traces of Italia's existence remained, hidden in obscure texts and forgotten memories. These fragments tell a story very different from the official history of the Daedric princes and their relationships with mortals. According to these hidden records, Italia actively opposed the manipulation and control that other Daedric princes exercised over mortals. She taught that individuals had the power to choose their own paths and create their own destinies. Her followers learned to resist the influence of both Daedra and Aedra, achieving a kind of spiritual independence that terrified the other divine beings. The threat she represented wasn't just to Mora, but to the entire system of divine worship and manipulation that governs Tamriel. If mortals truly believed they could shape their own fates, they would have no need for gods or Daedric princes. The entire cosmic hierarchy would collapse. Mora's role in her erasure reveals his true priorities. He is willing to work with enemies and make unprecedented sacrifices to maintain the illusion that mortals need divine guidance and intervention. His supposed rivalry with other Daedric princes might be nothing more than theater designed to hide their actual cooperation in maintaining control over mortal affairs. Looking at Italia, alongside other figures like Sheogorath and Gigalag, gives us more pieces of the puzzle. Gigalag was the Daedric Prince of Order, whose rigid logical approach to reality conflicted with the chaotic nature of other Daedric realms. His fellow princes cursed him to become Sheogorath, the Prince of Madness, transforming his ordered mind into something chaotic and unpredictable. But what if this curse wasn't just about punishing Gigalag's rigid nature? What if he had discovered something about the true nature of reality that threatened the other prince's control? His logical, systematic approach to understanding the cosmos might have revealed inconsistencies and contradictions that exposed their deceptions. The transformation of Gigalag into Sheogorath serves multiple purposes for Mora and his allies. It removes a potentially dangerous investigator from the field while creating a useful source of chaos and confusion. Sheogorath's madness makes him an unreliable witness, while his actions create the kind of instability that Mora can exploit for his own purposes. When we look at the timing of various divine interventions and curses, things get even more suspicious. The erasure of Italia, the cursing of Gigalag, and several other major alterations to divine hierarchy all seem to cluster around the same general time period in mythic history. This suggests a coordinated campaign to eliminate or neutralize any divine beings who posed a threat to the established order. Mora might have been the architect of this campaign, using his knowledge and influence to identify potential threats and coordinate responses to them. The implications are staggering. If Mora has been systematically eliminating or corrupting other divine beings for millennia, then the current pantheon of gods and Daedric princes might be nothing more than those who were willing to cooperate with his agenda. The cosmic order that mortals worship and fear might be an artificial construct designed to serve his purposes, but even Mora's carefully constructed system shows signs of strain. The return of memories and records related to Ethelia suggests that his control over reality isn't absolute. Some truths are too powerful to be completely erased, and some individuals are too determined to be completely controlled. Looking at Ethelia reveals something important about Mora's psychology. Despite his claims to omniscience and cosmic detachment, he's capable of fear. The lengths he went to in order to erase her from existence reveal a deep anxiety about challenges to his authority and worldview. This fear might be his greatest weakness. A truly omniscient being would have no need to eliminate threats because they would know how to handle any challenge. Mora's desperate actions suggest that his knowledge has limits and his power can be threatened by sufficiently determined opposition. The recent stirrings of memory about Ethelia might represent the beginning of a broader awakening. As more people begin to question the official histories and examine the contradictions in divine behavior, Mora's carefully constructed deceptions become harder to maintain. But Mora's regret about the erasure of Ethelia reveals another layer to his character. Despite his willingness to eliminate threats to his power, he seems to understand the cost of his actions. The removal of Ethelia didn't just eliminate a rival, it impoverished reality itself by removing possibilities and limiting potential futures. This regret suggests that Mora isn't entirely consumed by his quest for power and control. Some part of him recognizes the value of what he's destroyed and the harm he's caused. But this recognition doesn't seem to change his behavior. He continues to manipulate and deceive, even while understanding the consequences of his actions. The complexity of Mora's emotions around Ethelia's erasure might explain some of the contradictions in his character. His simultaneous desire for knowledge and willingness to destroy inconvenient truths reflects a deep internal conflict between his intellectual curiosity and his need for control. This psychological dimension makes Mora more dangerous rather than less. A completely amoral manipulator might be predictable in their selfishness, but someone who understands the cost of their actions and continues anyway is capable of almost any betrayal or sacrifice in service of their goals. The regret also suggests that Mora's current position isn't entirely satisfying to him. Despite achieving unprecedented power and influence, he's trapped by the very system he created. The constant need to maintain his deceptions and control potential threats leaves him little time or energy to pursue the genuine understanding he claims to value. This creates an interesting possibility for those who seek to oppose him. If Mora truly regrets some of his past actions, there might be ways to exploit that regret to limit his power or change his behavior. But any such approach would be extremely dangerous, as it would require getting close enough to one of the most manipulative beings in existence to attempt psychological influence. When we examine other Daedric princes and their connections to these hidden histories, we find more evidence of Mora's influence. Vermina, the prince of dreams and nightmares, has domain over the unconscious mind where suppressed memories might linger. Periate, despite his apparent weakness, has connections to the natural order that Mora's manipulations constantly disrupt. Even more interesting is the figure of Torvazard, a name that appears in connection with these hidden histories but whose identity and role remain mysterious. Some texts suggest that Torvazard was involved in the preservation of forbidden knowledge about Ethelia and other erased truths. The existence of figures like Torvazard suggests that resistance to Mora's control has existed throughout history. There have always been individuals and groups working to preserve suppressed knowledge and maintain awareness of hidden truths. Their efforts might be the reason why fragments of Ethelia's story survived despite Mora's best efforts to erase them. These resistance movements operate in the shadows, using many of the same techniques that Mora employs, but for different purposes. Instead of seeking control and manipulation, they work to preserve freedom and maintain access to suppressed information. The ongoing struggle between Mora's forces and these resistance movements might be the real hidden history of Tamriel. While mortals see conflicts between nations and races, the true battle might be between those who seek to control knowledge and those who seek to liberate it. Understanding this hidden conflict provides a new perspective on many historical events. Wars, political upheavals, and cultural changes might actually be surface manifestations of deeper struggles over information and consciousness. The real victors and losers might not be the obvious political entities, but the hidden factions fighting for control over how reality is understood and interpreted. This brings us to one of the most important questions about Hermaeus Mora's deception. What is his ultimate goal? If he's been manipulating events for millennia, erasing inconvenient truths, and controlling the flow of information, what is he trying to achieve? The answer might lie in examining the pattern of his interventions throughout history. Mora consistently acts to prevent mortals from achieving true independence or understanding. He maintains systems of dependence where individuals and civilizations require divine or Daedric intervention to solve their problems. This suggests that his goal isn't knowledge for its own sake, but the maintenance of a cosmic hierarchy where mortals remain subordinate to divine beings. By ensuring that mortals never develop the wisdom or capability to stand on their own, he guarantees his continued relevance and power. The erasure of Ithelia fits perfectly into this pattern. Her teachings about self-determination and personal agency directly threatened the system of dependence that Mora had spent millennia creating. If mortals believed they could shape their own destinies, they would have no need for prophetic knowledge or divine guidance. But this raises another disturbing possibility. What if Mora's manipulation extends beyond individual mortals to the very nature of reality itself? If he can erase Daedric princes from existence and rewrite fundamental aspects of history, he might also be able to alter the laws of magic, the structure of time, or even the basic principles that govern consciousness and free will. The implications of such power are almost incomprehensible. Every spell cast, every prayer offered, every moment of inspiration or revelation might be subject to his influence. The very thoughts in our heads might not be entirely our own, but influenced by his subtle manipulations. This level of control would make resistance extremely difficult but important. If Mora has indeed achieved such comprehensive influence over reality, then the occasional glitches and inconsistencies in his system become crucial opportunities for liberation. The preserved memories of Ithelia, the contradictions in historical records, and the independent actions of individuals who resist his influence might be the only thing standing between mortals and complete mental servitude. The heroes of Tamriel, the Nerevarine, the champion of Cyrodiil, and the Dragonborn take on new significance when viewed through this lens. These individuals achieved legendary status through their ability to act independently and make choices that changed the course of history. But how much of their independence was real, and how much was carefully managed by Mora to serve his purposes? The Nerevarines' journey to fulfill the prophecies of the Tribunal Temple led to the destruction of the old religious order and the return of the Daedra's influence over Morrowind. The champion of Cyrodiil's actions during the Oblivion Crisis resulted in the collapse of the Septim Empire and created a power vacuum that destabilized all of Tamriel. The Dragonborn's defeat of Alduin prevented the end of the world, but also ensured that the current system of divine hierarchy would continue unchanged. Each of these heroes made choices that they believed were their own, but the results consistently served to maintain or enhance the very systems of divine influence that Mora supports. This pattern suggests that even the most independent-seeming individuals might be unconsciously guided toward decisions that serve his agenda. But there's another possibility that's even more disturbing. What if these heroes weren't just influenced by Mora, but were actually created by him? The Nerevarine was the reincarnation of Indoril Nerevar, but what if that reincarnation was artificially triggered or guided? the champion of Cyrodiil, appeared at exactly the right moment to fulfill the prophecies about the dragonfires. But what if those prophecies were self-fulfilling, because Mora ensured the right person would be in the right place at the right time? The Dragonborn represents the clearest example of this pattern. They possess souls that are simultaneously mortal and draconic, a combination that shouldn't naturally occur. Their abilities develop at an unprecedented rate. They learn shouts instinctively, and they consistently make choices that serve the broader cosmic order, despite having no particular reason to do so. What if the Dragonborn isn't a natural phenomenon blessed by Akatosh, but an artificial creation designed by Mora to serve as the ultimate agent of his will? The dragon's soul could be a modification that allows for enhanced learning and magical ability, while the mortal body provides the flexibility and independence needed to operate in the mortal world. This would explain why every Dragonborn eventually ends up dealing with Hermaeus Mora in significant ways. They're not drawn to forbidden knowledge by curiosity or circumstance. They're compelled by their very nature to seek out the information and power that only he can provide. The fate that awaits all of Mora's servants, the gradual erosion of independence and personality until only a useful tool remains, might be the ultimate destiny of every Dragonborn. The power they wield comes with a price that becomes clear only after it's too late to refuse payment. If this theory is correct, then the entire narrative structure of the Elder Scrolls games takes on a much darker tone. Players aren't experiencing stories of heroic triumph over cosmic evil, but elaborate psychological conditioning designed to normalize the acceptance of divine manipulation and control. The choices presented to players might not be meaningful alternatives, but carefully crafted options designed to create the illusion of agency while ensuring that all paths lead to the same destination. No matter what decisions are made, the result serves Mora's interests and reinforces the system of dependence he spent millennia creating. But even if this darkest interpretation is correct, the very fact that we can recognize and articulate these patterns suggests that Mora's control isn't absolute. The ability to question, to analyze, and to resist comes from something deeper than the surface-level consciousness that he manipulates. The human capacity for independent thought, for moral reasoning, and for genuine choice might be the one thing that Mora cannot fully control or eliminate. His need to work through deception and manipulation rather than direct compulsion suggests that there are limits to his power over consciousness itself. This gives hope to those who seek to resist his influence. By developing critical thinking skills, by questioning official narratives, and by maintaining awareness of manipulation techniques, individuals might be able to preserve their independence even in the face of cosmic-level deception. The key to resistance might lie in embracing the very qualities that Itelia represented, the recognition that multiple paths are always possible, that destiny is not fixed, and that individuals have the power to choose their own directions, regardless of what gods or Daedric princes might prefer. But such resistance comes with enormous risks. Mora has shown himself willing to erase entire beings from existence to maintain his control. Individuals who pose too great a threat to his system might find themselves facing consequences that go far beyond simple death or imprisonment. The fate of the Daedrologist provides a perfect example of what happens to those who dig too deeply into Mora's secrets. This scholar spent years investigating the true nature of the Daedric princes and their relationships with mortals. His research was methodical, careful, and increasingly successful at uncovering hidden truths. But as his understanding grew, so did the dangers he faced. His memories became unreliable, his notes would change when he wasn't looking, and his colleagues began to forget that his research had ever existed. Finally, the Daedrologist himself vanished, leaving behind only fragments of his work and vague recollections among those who had known him. This pattern, the gradual erasure of inconvenient researchers and their work, might be one of Mora's most common techniques for maintaining his secrets. Rather than dramatic confrontations or obvious suppressions, he simply makes troublesome individuals and their discoveries fade away until they might as well have never existed. The subtlety of this approach makes it particularly effective because it leaves no obvious evidence of interference. Colleagues and friends are left with vague feelings that something is missing, but they can't articulate what they've lost, or even be certain that anything was actually taken from them. This technique might explain many of the gaps and inconsistencies in Tamriel's historical record. The missing information isn't just the result of time and accident, but active suppression by an entity with the power to edit reality itself. Understanding Mora's methods provides insight into how to resist them, but the knowledge comes with its own dangers. Simply being aware of his techniques might be enough to draw his attention, and those who know too much about his true nature might find themselves facing the same fate as the vanished Daedrologist. The challenge facing anyone who seeks to expose Hermaeus Mora's deceptions is how to spread the knowledge without becoming a target themselves. The information needs to be preserved and transmitted in ways that don't trigger his defensive responses, while still being accessible to those who need to understand the truth. This might require adopting some of the same techniques that Mora himself uses, working through indirect influence, embedding important information in seemingly innocent contexts, and building networks of individuals who each possess only part of the complete picture. The resistance movements that have preserved fragments of Athelia's story provide a model for this kind of distributed preservation of dangerous knowledge. By spreading the information across multiple sources and encoding it in various forms, they've managed to keep it alive despite Mora's best efforts to eliminate it. But the ultimate question remains: is resistance possible, or is the very act of recognizing Mora's influence just another layer of his deception? What if the awareness of manipulation is itself a controlled response, designed to create the illusion of independence while actually serving his deeper purposes? This paranoid possibility highlights the true horror of Mora's potential power. If he can control even the recognition of control, then there might be no escape from his influence. Every act of resistance might actually be another form of service. Every moment of apparent independence might actually be carefully managed rebellion. But even faced with this possibility, the choice remains between action and passivity, between the attempt to understand and the acceptance of ignorance. The very fact that these questions can be asked suggests that something within consciousness remains beyond manipulation, the fundamental drive to seek truth and meaning, regardless of the consequences. Whether Hermaeus Mora is lying to us or not, the search for truth remains worthwhile. Even if our understanding is limited and our independence illusory, the effort to comprehend reality and our place within it represents the best of what mortals can achieve. The tentacled prince of forbidden knowledge might control much of what we know and how we know it, but he cannot eliminate the basic human need to question, to explore, and to understand. That drive might be the one thing that truly threatens his power, because it represents a force that seeks truth for its own sake, rather than for the advantages it might provide. In the end, the question of whether Mora is lying to us might be less important than our determination to keep asking questions regardless of the answers we receive. The search for truth is its own reward, and the preservation of that search might be the only meaningful resistance to any force that seeks to control how we think and what we believe. Hermaeus Mora teaches us to be skeptical of any source of knowledge that claims ultimate authority, to question even our most basic assumptions about reality, and to preserve our capacity for independent thought regardless of the cost. Whether he's lying or telling the truth, these lessons remain valuable and necessary for anyone who seeks to understand the world around them.